In the spring of 1850, the quiet town of Stratford, Connecticut, found itself at the center of one of the most bewildering paranormal cases in early American history. Newspapers across New England would soon report on a home where objects moved on their own, furniture toppled without warning, and uncanny, lifelike effigies appeared in rooms so suddenly and so impossibly that no living hand could have placed them there. The case became known as the Stratford Poltergeist. At the center of the storm stood a respected clergyman, Reverend Dr. Eliakim Phelps. A man of learning, a man of faith, and a man who believed he had seen something no earthly explanation could fully account for. Tonight, we examine the events that unfolded inside the Phelps residence, and the theories, both supernatural and skeptical, that continue to divide historians, investigators, and believers. Reverend Dr. Eliakim Phelps was 59 years old when the disturbances began in March 1850. A scholarly minister with decades of service, he was known for his intelligence, calm demeanor, and unconventional interests in theology and spiritualism, unusual for a Presbyterian-leaning clergyman. Widowed in his late 50s with grown children from his first marriage, who had left home, he remarried a much younger widow named Sarah, who brought 3 children from her previous marriage. Living in the household were Sarah's children, Anna, 16, Henry, 11, and a younger daughter, about 6, often referred to as Hannah in later accounts. Also in the home was Eliakim and Sarah's biological son, Sidney, about 3 years old at the time. The family dynamic was complex. An older patriarch, a young wife unhappy in the new town and often tired or upset, and children navigating a blended household under stress. Some suggest this tension contributed. Others argue the event's scale and persistence defy simple explanations. Before the disturbances, the Phelps family had moved into an eccentric house in February 1848. The Phelps residence stood on Elm Street in Stratford, a large, 3-story Greek Revival mansion built in 1826 by General Matthias Nickel for his daughter Eliza and her husband, Sea Captain George R. Dowell, or Dowdle. It featured a distinctive 70-foot-long main hallway, 12 feet wide, with twin staircases mirroring a clipper ship's layout, multiple interconnected rooms, narrow hallways, and odd angles that created a maze-like feel. Phelps purchased the home, intending a peaceful retirement. Instead, it became the stage for one of America's most dramatic poltergeist cases. It begins innocently enough on the evening of March 4th. Reverend Phelps welcomes an old friend, a fellow clergyman intrigued by the rising tide of spiritualism sweeping the nation. Inspired by tales of mediums and communications from beyond, the 2 men decide to experiment with a simple séance at the dining table. As they sit in quiet anticipation, faint, irregular knocks echo through the room, disorganized raps that fade as quickly as they appear. Dismissing it as mere curiosity, they end the session, unaware that they may have opened a door to something far more persistent. The disturbances began on Sunday, March 10th, 1850. As the family left for church that morning, Reverend Phelps locked every chamber door, secured the front and back entrances, and carried the keys with him. No one remained inside. Even the family's maid was away in Bridgeport, attending Mass. But when the family returned at noon, the front door now stood wide open. The upstairs chambers, locked only hours before, were unlatched. And inside the nursery, chaos reigned. Chairs were overturned, tools scattered, and household items placed in bizarre positions, as if some unseen intruder had worked quickly and without fear of discovery. Yet nothing was stolen. Silver, valuables, even a gold watch left in plain sight, untouched. Thinking the intruders might return, Reverend Phelps armed himself and remained at home, while the rest of the family went back to church for the afternoon services. The house stayed quiet. No footsteps, no movement, nothing to suggest anyone had come back. When the family finally returned from church, they found that in one of the upstairs bedrooms, Mrs. Phelps' nightgown had been arranged on the bed in the unmistakable outline of a body prepared for burial. Strange, cryptic symbols were written on the wall. It was a quiet but chilling tableau, a first hint of the far stranger manifestations that were about to engulf the household. The next morning after breakfast, in that same bedroom, a sheet was found spread across the floor with the washstand laying overturned on it. A candlestick was placed on the stand, and the same nightgown and chemise used the day before to mimic a corpse were now stuffed into the wash bowl and pitcher. Both garments had been removed and placed in a trunk inside the closet the previous afternoon. Even more unsettling, while Reverend Phelps and his wife stood discussing the bizarre arrangement on the washstand, Mrs. Phelps glanced under the bed and found the very same nightgown and chemise now lying there, as if they had been moved in an instant without either of them noticing. Reverend Phelps inspected them, noting their marked names and numbers, and put them back into the trunk. He then locked the closet, kept the key with him, and secured the chamber door after the family stepped out. About 15 minutes later, after being called upstairs, Dr. Phelps returned to the hall and found the same garments lying at the head of the stairs. The chamber door remained locked. Using his key, he entered the room, then unlocked the closet. Inside the trunk, the garments were no longer present. It was at this point, Dr. Phelps later stated, that he first believed something unexplained was taking place in the house. March 11th marked a turning point inside the Phelps residence. What had begun as strange disturbances suddenly erupted into open, physical chaos. According to Dr. Phelps, the first sign came without warning. An umbrella, standing quietly at the end of the hall, suddenly launched itself through the air, sailing nearly 25 feet with no visible force behind it. Moments later, a wooden bucket perched at the top of the staircase was hurled down into the entryway below. The house seemed to come alive. Small objects, nails, forks, spoons, bits of iron, even keys, shot across rooms from impossible angles. Some could have been thrown by human hands, but many came from directions where no person could have been standing. Dr. Phelps insisted there was simply no natural explanation for the trajectories he witnessed. That afternoon, he and Mrs. Phelps left for Bridgeport, 3 miles away. But the activity didn't stop in their absence. In the dining room, the fireplace shovel and tongs were violently flung down the basement stairs. A strip of mourning crepe appeared tied to the back door knocker. And upstairs, mirrors in the front chambers were found draped with sheets and tablecloths, an old custom reserved for homes where someone had recently died. Dr. Phelps later removed the coverings himself. In at least one room, the mirrors were positioned so high and so awkwardly that placing the cloths there would have been nearly impossible for anyone inside the house. Throughout the afternoon, more objects were reported flying across rooms, as if the unseen force was continuing its work whether the family was present or not. But just after sundown, everything stopped. The house fell silent, and for the rest of the night, not a single disturbance was recorded. But on March 12th, the third day, the activity intensified. Objects flew with greater force. Kitchen items vanished and reappeared in impossible places. Mrs. Phelps, now frightened, urged her husband to call for help. Reverend Phelps turned to his trusted friend, Reverend John Mitchell, a retired clergyman known throughout Stratford for his intelligence, experience, and sound judgment. Mitchell agreed to visit the home. Dr. Phelps told him only that the family had been unsettled by certain occurrences and asked that he observe for himself. Mitchell remained throughout the day. At first, he was convinced the disturbances must be caused by someone in the household, most likely the maid in the kitchen or one of the children, and he focused his attention on them, expecting to uncover a simple explanation. At his request, the door between the parlors and the kitchen was locked, cutting off all communication between the rooms. Yet the objects continued to fall and move as before. The children were then sent out, and the doors secured behind them. But the activity did not stop. Mitchell stayed through most of the day and returned early the next morning, eventually spending nearly 3 weeks in and out of the home. Before the end of his second day, he concluded that neither the maid nor the children were responsible for the movements he had witnessed. On March 13th, the manifestations began before dawn. A book leapt from a shelf 10 or 12 feet away. The heavy wooden fireboard that sealed the fireplace opening was violently thrown across the room, crashing onto the floor with enough force to wake the children. At breakfast, a large potato, stored in a distant upstairs closet, fell beside Reverend Phelps's plate, as if placed by an invisible hand. Throughout the day, Bibles and prayer books were found opened to specific passages. Chairs were overturned. Lamps were placed on the floor with hats placed on top of them. Entire rooms were rearranged in the brief moments when no one was watching. Between 1 and 4 o'clock that afternoon, 46 objects were thrown or transported from distant parts of the house. A padlock from an upstairs closet dropped at Reverend Mitchell's feet. A toy mouse rose from the piano and landed beside Reverend Phelps. A piece of cheese rind lifted itself from the carpet, floated 4 or 5 feet into the air, and sailed over the sofa. Before leaving on Wednesday night, Reverend Mitchell made a simple request. If the strange activity returned, he wanted additional witnesses brought in. He wouldn't have to wait long. At dawn on Thursday, March 14th, the manifestations began again, almost exactly as they had the day before. After breakfast, the family discovered a sheet spread across the floor. Several Bibles opened to random passages, and the candlesticks arranged in a perfect row, the tallest placed deliberately in the center, all of them hidden beneath a sheet. Other objects had been moved with no clear purpose except, perhaps, to demand attention. At Reverend Mitchell's urging, messages were sent to 2 respected men in the community, a congregational minister, only known in the records as Reverend W., and Mr. Plant, a well-known attorney. Both men soon would experience the ongoing disturbances inside the Phelps home, observing the activity not as rumor or testimony, but as events unfolding in front of them. And they weren't alone. Over the following days, several additional visitors, including neighbors, clergymen, and professional men from the area, also witnessed the manifestations firsthand, adding further weight to the growing sense that something extraordinary was taking place in the house. It was around this time that the household first heard the rappings and the heavy poundings. Witnesses described a deep, resonant thud, as if someone were striking the floor with a heavy tool. The sound came most often from the middle chamber, yet whenever anyone entered the room, the noise stopped instantly. Then the activity escalated. A chair was seen rising from the floor and slamming down again, 5 or 6 times, with such force that the entire house trembled. A large plated candlestick, resting on the mantel, was hurled to the floor by an unseen force, then lifted and beaten against the boards until the metal snapped. It was the first object in the home to be physically damaged. Throughout the day, the pounding continued, sometimes like an axe striking wood, other times like a massive weight dropped from above, and on several occasions, the pounding ended in a scream. Witnesses described it as something between the cry of a cat and the bleating of a calf, but far louder than either. These screams were heard nearly 20 times, echoing from the 3rd story, the front hall chamber, the yard outside, and other impossible locations. No words, no voices, only pounding, knocking, and those chilling screams. That evening, just after several young ladies had visited, Dr. Phelps's daughter Anna returned to the parlor. It was between 9 and 10 o'clock. As she stepped inside, the iron stand holding the fire shovel, tongs, and poker suddenly leapt from the hearth into the center of the room. Then it rose and slammed against the floor with such violence that the impact could be felt throughout the house. Terrified, she fled toward the stairs. As she passed through the dining room, she saw the large mahogany breakfast table, 3 feet 9 inches wide, over 5 feet long, rise into the air and pound the floor 5 or 6 times. The force shook the entire structure. Many in the house heard it. Mrs. Phelps cried out, "Oh, take me from this place," and for good reason. Until that night, every manifestation had ceased by sundown. But now, the disturbances had crossed a new threshold. What happened next inside the Phelps Mansion would become one of the most unsettling chapters of the entire case. Beginning on March 14th, the family started discovering what witnesses later described as images, human-shaped figures assembled from dresses, bonnets, shawls, muffs, towels, pillows, and whatever garments or household fabrics the unseen force could gather. At first, there were only 2 or 3, but within days, the activity exploded. On the morning of March 16th, the family opened the door to an upstairs room and found it transformed. 11 cloth effigies stood arranged in a circle, each one shaped from clothing and household fabrics into a simple, unmistakably human form. All of them were positioned in postures of prayer or quiet devotion, some kneeling, others bowed low, their bodies angled toward the floor in a gesture of shared reverence. Before every figure lay a Bible or prayer book, opened to passages that seemed chosen with deliberate, unsettling intent. But the most disturbing details were at the center of the display. Among the kneeling female figures was a small, twisted, imp-like effigy, grotesquely assembled, its proportions wrong, its presence jarring against the otherwise devotional tableau. And above the group, suspended from a cord, hung another figure, arranged to appear as though it were flying through the air, its posture and placement suggesting motion frozen in time. The effect was so convincing that the Phelps' 3-year-old son, Sidney, seeing one figure made from his mother's dress, whispered to his sister, "Ma is saying prayers." Objects from around the house had been moved and incorporated with impossible care. A portable writing desk was taken from a secretary and placed neatly on the floor with a towel draped over it, positioned before a child-sized effigy kneeling in prayer. A clock was carried 20 feet from the nursery mantel and set on the floor, still ticking when it was found. And all of it appeared in total silence. No one ever saw the clothing move or the figures being assembled. Rooms that had been empty minutes earlier were suddenly filled with elaborate theatrical scenes. Witnesses, including clergymen, physicians, and skeptical investigators, confirmed that many of these displays appeared while the rooms were locked and guarded, with no one inside. By the time the disturbances subsided, more than 30 effigies had been created, some arranged with such artistry and speed that observers insisted no group of people could have produced them without being heard. To the Phelps family, and to many who saw the scenes firsthand, the effigies were more than pranks or illusions. They were deliberate, intelligent displays, silent messages assembled with unsettling precision, hinting at something unseen moving through the rooms and reshaping the space around it. As the weeks passed, the unusual activity inside the home continued, giving rise to a series of increasingly strange events. Objects continued to defy the laws of nature. Utensils and silverware levitated from tables, hovering briefly before crashing down. Books hurtled from shelves, their pages fluttering wildly. Chairs scraped across floors by themselves, and heavy tables reared up on their legs as if possessed by an invisible force. Blankets were pulled from beds and fluttered through the air as though caught in an unseen wind. Small objects launched from unoccupied places, often moving at abnormally slow speeds through the air, almost in slow motion, before gently touching down or dropping, as if carefully placed by a deliberate hand. Turnips etched with cryptic symbols appearing on countertops, only to be hurled with violent accuracy, splattering against walls, or aimed at the bewildered residents. Marble-top tables, ponderous and unyielding, rose into the air before slamming down with shattering force, splintering into fragments. On one occasion, the piano was heard playing, even though the room was empty. On another, it had been rotated in place, with the keys facing the wall. Over the ensuing months, windows shattered in sudden explosions, with more than 80 panes destroyed, the repairs draining hundreds of dollars from the household coffers. The force behind some of the disturbances left unmistakable physical marks. Objects were thrown hard enough to strike doors and wall panels, leaving dents that witnesses later examined. One account describes a door panel bearing fresh indentations from repeated blows, even though the person supposedly responsible was laying in bed, far out of reach. These tangible traces only deepened the growing conviction that no human hand could account for the chaos unfolding inside the mansion. Late one night in May, the quiet of the house was broken by an encounter unlike any before. Anna was in the east bedroom, its door standing open to the room where Reverend and Mrs. Phelps slept, a single lamp positioned so its light spilled evenly across both spaces. As the rooms lay dimly lit, Anna suddenly called out, claiming to see a tall figure draped in a sheet, moving slowly through the doorway that connected the two rooms. Moments later, Mrs. Phelps said she saw it too. At first, Reverend Phelps saw nothing, though he stood in full view of the same threshold. But after several tense moments, the apparition finally came into focus for him as well. A towering, sheet-covered form gliding silently from one room to the other. Determined to confront it, he sprang from the bed and moved toward the figure, closing the distance to only a few feet before it slipped back and vanished. As it disappeared, a sheet dropped into a nearby chair, as if released by unseen hands. One afternoon, while Anna was in the dining room and her cousin and the children were outside, she heard someone enter the front parlor. When she stepped in, she saw three men, two on the sofa, one seated at the table with his feet up, each wearing hats pulled low over their eyes. None of them looked at her or reacted as she approached. When she got within a few feet, the man nearest her suddenly tipped sideways, chair and all, crashing to the floor, and in an instant, all three vanished. Terrified, Anna ran to her cousin at the front door. They rushed back inside, but the room was empty. The fallen chair remained, yet no one had entered or left. The effigies returned with haunting regularity, up to 30 more manifesting over the weeks. Some discovered hidden in closets or tucked beneath beds, others arranged in parlors or chambers in elaborate poses of prayer or repose. They emerged in locked rooms or during fleeting absences, their creation defying human speed and stealth. The physical assaults began quietly, almost without warning, less than a week after the activity began. What started as unexplained disturbances soon escalated into direct attacks on the Phelps children, turning the household into the center of a baffling and increasingly dangerous series of events. 11-year-old Henry Phelps, the stepson of Reverend Phelps, became the primary target, enduring incidents that witnesses struggled to explain. In one of the earliest documented episodes, Reverend Phelps reported that Henry was struck by small stones while the two were traveling together in a carriage. The projectiles appeared to come from no identifiable source. The minister later described the event as both sudden and unnerving, with no natural explanation for how the stones reached them. Another account came from a reporter for the New York Sun, who stayed in the mansion to observe the disturbances firsthand. According to his testimony, Henry was lifted from his bed by an unseen force. The boy rose steadily into the air, moved across the room, and was then dropped onto the floor. The reporter noted the incident in detail, emphasizing that no one was near the child at the time. The assaults continued with pinches and slaps that left clear marks on Henry's skin. Witnesses, including visiting clergymen, claimed they saw red welts form as the boy cried out in pain. These events often occurred in full view of multiple observers, adding to the growing sense that something extraordinary was unfolding inside the home. Henry's clothing also became a frequent target. Garments were pulled, twisted, and torn by forces no one could see. And on several occasions, Strange, chalk-like characters, described by witnesses as resembling a kind of spiritual script, appeared on his clothing without explanation. These repeated attacks, witnessed by reporters, clergymen, and family members alike, deepened the mystery and reinforced the belief among many observers that the disturbances were not merely tricks or misunderstandings, but part of a deliberate and escalating pattern focused on the boy. Henry's 16-year-old sister Anna experienced similar attacks. She reported being shoved, pinched, and struck by invisible hands, and on one occasion, a ribbon was cinched around her neck while she slept, tight enough that she was nearly strangled. In one documented case, a journalist watched as red marks appeared on her arms, accompanied by sharp, audible blows, despite no one standing close enough to touch her. On one day, a broken piece of brick was hurled down the third-story stairs with great force, nearly hitting Anna in the head as she walked down the stairs. A fire shovel was also dropped from above, almost striking her. Once while she was standing on the front porch, about to leave for a visit to New Haven, a small bottle of ink flew from an open front room window and splattered across her dress, completely ruining it. No one had been in the room at the time. Even the younger children were not entirely spared. Though less frequently targeted, they too suffered sudden pinches or slaps, adding to the family's growing fear and exhaustion as the disturbances continued day and night. As the activity intensified, some episodes left Henry briefly unconscious, while others involved sudden disappearances in which he was found moments later in another part of the house, confused and unable to explain how he had moved. At other times, he was seized by an unseen force so violently that he believed he was being lifted from the floor and carried upward, left in a state of terror that lingered for days. He was thrown into a cistern on one occasion, found tied and suspended from a tree on another, and several times collapsed into a strange, trance-like state that could last anywhere from 10 to 50 minutes. These incidents, combined with the physical attacks, pushed the family to the brink. Their search for answers was met only with deeper uncertainty, as each new episode seemed to defy any rational explanation. The children's suffering, witnessed repeatedly by reporters, clergymen, and neighbors, became one of the most disturbing elements of the entire haunting. What began as strange noises and unexplained movements had escalated into a relentless pattern of assaults that left the household terrified, exhausted, and increasingly desperate for relief. In the spring of 1850, as the disturbances inside the Phelps Mansion grew more violent and unpredictable, the family made a controversial decision. Rather than retreat from the unknown, they attempted to communicate with it. Reverend Eliakim Phelps, Presbyterian minister, scholar, and the family patriarch, believed that if an unseen intelligence was behind the chaos, then perhaps it could be reasoned with. His thinking was shaped by the era's rising fascination with spiritualism, sparked just 2 years earlier by the Fox sisters of Hydesville, New York. In 1848, the teenage sisters Maggie and Kate claimed to communicate with a spirit through mysterious rapping sounds, a story that spread rapidly after their older sister Leah organized public demonstrations. The so-called Rochester rappings ignited a nationwide craze for séances and spirit communication, a cultural wave that soon reached Stratford. What began as a single experimental séance on March 4, 1850, soon evolved into a series of structured attempts to reach whatever forces had taken hold of the home. The sessions were simple and unsettling. Phelps would sit at the dining table, the same table where the first experiment had been held, and ask questions aloud. The answers came as sharp raps on walls, doors, or furniture. At first, the knocks were random, but when Phelps introduced an alphabetic code, one rap for A, two for B, and so on, the responses grew disturbingly organized. The raps revealed up to 5 entities, 3 gentle or benevolent spirits offering cryptic, sometimes comforting guidance, and 2 aggressive ones fueling the destruction. one malevolent spirit identified itself as a deceased law clerk who had defrauded Sarah Phelps from her first marriage's estate. It claimed to be in hell and causing the disturbances for fun, requesting pumpkin pie and gin as offerings. Phelps verified the fraud the next day by checking old accounts, finding a discrepancy matching the spirit's details. One night, Henry told his mother he'd been awakened by a figure in white who claimed to be his deceased father and gave him a silver watch. Dismissing it as a dream, she confirmed the valuable watch her late husband had left for Henry was still in a locked drawer and kept the key in her pocket. But later that day, Henry returned, holding that same watch, saying the figure had appeared again and placed it in his hand. Soon, spirit writings began to appear throughout the mansion. The messages were taunting or ominous. Notes written in fresh ink materialized on blank sheets of paper. In Phelps's study, a blank sheet bore, "Very nice paper and very nice ink for the devil," in wet ink after he briefly turned away. Other notes signed with aliases like Sam Slick, Beelzebub, or HP Devil appeared in sealed boxes or left on tables, other times drifting down in the middle of meals. After the violent attacks against Henry and Anna, the children were sent away to boarding school, and the disturbances in the Phelps home quieted to an uneasy calm. Weeks passed without incident, until, just hours before Henry was due to return, a sheet of paper marked with strange symbols dropped to the floor near the front door. After Henry arrived, another paper was found in his hat with the message, "The good ones say that all is done, but the wicked ones say it has just begun." With Henry back in the home, the lull ended abruptly, with the activity surging back to life with renewed force. Messages were often false, contradictory, or nonsensical, leading Phelps to question their validity. The writings, appearing without warning and often in impossible circumstances, deepened the mystery and convinced many observers that the force within the home was not only intelligent, but capable of deliberate deception and unsettling insight. Each new note, whether mocking, threatening, or strangely playful, added to the growing sense that the family was dealing with something far more complex than simple mischief, something that understood them, watched them, and chose its moments with unnerving precision. From the very beginning of the disturbances in March of 1850, Reverend Eliakim Phelps made a decision that set the Stratford case apart from nearly every other haunting of its era. He opened his doors, not just to friends, not just to clergy, but to skeptics, reporters, scientists, and anyone who believed they could expose a hoax. According to Phelps' own letters, published in the New Haven Journal and the New York Observer, scores of reputable persons were invited to stay in the mansion, observe the phenomena firsthand, and apply whatever tests they wished. What followed became one of the most extraordinary sequences of eyewitness investigations in 19th century America. The first and most determined investigator was Reverend John Mitchell, a retired clergyman and close friend of Phelps. Mitchell arrived only days after the disturbances began. He suspected the children, Anna and Henry, or the maid. So he locked them in separate rooms, placed them under constant watch, and waited for the activity to stop. It didn't. Objects continued to fly, appear, and vanish. In one of the most dramatic incidents, Mitchell, Phelps, and Mrs. Phelps stood in a locked parlor and watched 46 small objects materialize in midair and drift gently to the floor. This event was reported in the New Haven Journal and later compilations. Mitchell attempted direct communication using an alphabetic rapping code. The responses, he said, were foul and blasphemous. By the end of his investigation, Mitchell abandoned all natural explanations. He concluded the force in the house was intelligent and malevolent. Next came the family skeptics. Eliakim's adult son, Austin, a professor at Andover Theological Seminary, and his brother Abner, a respected Boston physician and legislator. Embarrassed by the growing publicity, they traveled to Stratford, determined to expose a fraud. On their first night, they guarded the front door from opposite sides. Loud poundings struck the door between them, with no visible source. On the second night, they heard violent raps from Anna's room. When they burst inside, they found dents in the door panel, yet Anna was in bed, fully covered, and out of reach. Austen later wrote that experts arrived in triumphant expectation and left in dogged silence, convinced of nothing, yet solving nothing. Both men departed believing the phenomena were real and beyond human cause. On March 16, 1850, just 6 days after the disturbances began, the editor of the Derby Journal, Mr. Newson, arrived with 3 companions. They spent the night inside the mansion. They witnessed objects flying through the air, furniture toppling in empty rooms, and relentless poundings that echoed through the walls and doors. Newson published a detailed account, admitting he could find no rational explanation. His report helped propel the story across Connecticut. By late April, national newspapers were taking notice. An unnamed reporter from the New York Sun stayed on site and observed one of the most disturbing incidents of the entire case. While watching Anna and Mrs. Phelps continuously, leaving no opportunity for trickery, he saw Anna's arm jerk violently. She cried out that she had been pinched. When he rolled up her sleeve, fresh red welts appeared before his eyes. He also reported hearing audible slaps with no visible hand. His article expressed genuine bafflement and helped spread the story nationwide. Throughout the spring and summer of 1850, the mansion became a revolving door of investigators. Clergymen, journalists, neighbors, and curiosity seekers stayed overnight, sometimes for days at a time. Correspondents writing under names like Veritas, W, and H.B. Taylor described slow-motion levitations, effigies appearing in locked rooms, and physical assaults on the children. One letter described 46 items descending gently in a locked parlor, corroborating Mitchell's earlier account. Despite constant watching, locked room tests, and attempts to isolate every family member, no one uncovered a human cause. Only one prominent figure offered a different explanation: Andrew Jackson Davis, the famous clairvoyant. He never visited the house, but through correspondence, he suggested the disturbances were caused by vital radiations, unconscious psychic energy from the living, especially the adolescents. His interpretation stood apart from the others, offering a very different lens through which to view the disturbances. By the end of the outbreak, dozens of witnesses, skeptics, scientists, clergymen, and reporters had examined the Phelps Mansion under some of the strictest conditions ever applied to a 19th century haunting. Not one exposed a hoax, not one identified a culprit, and not one could explain how the phenomena continued even when the suspected children were locked away, watched continuously, or physically separated from the events. As Phelps himself wrote in 1850, scores of reputable persons witnessed these things, with no solution. To this day, the Stratford Poltergeist remains one of the most thoroughly investigated and least debunked paranormal cases in American history. By late summer of 1850, the Phelps family had endured nearly 8 months of unrelenting chaos. The rappings, the flying objects, the eerie effigies, the spirit writings, and above all, the physical attacks on the children had pushed them to the edge of collapse. What had begun as a curiosity had become a siege, and Reverend Eliakim Phelps and his wife Sarah finally reached a devastating conclusion. The only way to survive was to leave the mansion behind. According to accounts from the period, a spirit message appeared with a taunting question: "How soon do the family expect to go to Pennsylvania? I wish to make some arrangements before they go. Please answer in writing." Phelps quietly wrote, "About the 1st of October," on a nearby sheet of paper. The family departed Stratford on October 2nd, 1850. Sarah and the children fled first. Phelps stayed behind only long enough to settle their affairs. walking through the silent rooms of a house that had terrorized them for months. The family spent the winter of 1850 to 1851 in Philadelphia, and the transformation was immediate. The disturbances stopped. No rappings, no flying objects, no spirit writings. For the first time in months, the children slept through the night. Whatever had haunted them in Stratford had not followed. Then, in March of 1851, the Phelps family returned to the mansion. The house had been locked up under a neighbor's care, and everything inside was exactly as they had left it, with no sign of disturbance. In the months that followed, there were more spirit communications and occasional phenomena, but nothing like the destructive force of the previous year. Gradually, the activity faded away. They lived there for roughly another year before returning to Philadelphia. Reverend Phelps retained ownership of the property, eventually selling it in 1859 to Moses Yale Beach, the influential publisher of the New York Sun. By then, the family had begun spending more time away from Stratford. Sarah Phelps had passed away the previous year in Philadelphia, and the mansion no longer held the same place in their lives. The house itself survived long after the Phelps family moved on. In the 1940s, it became the Restmore Convalescent Home, a quiet nursing facility. The nursing home operated for several decades, with some reports of minor lingering paranormal activity, such as whispers or knocks noted by staff in later years, though nothing on the scale of the 1850 events. But time was not kind to the old structure. A devastating fire in 1970 left it badly damaged. Vandals and decay finished the rest. In 1974, more than a century after the poltergeist outbreak, the mansion was finally demolished. Today, the site at 1738 Elm Street is just a peaceful residential neighborhood. No trace remains of the grand home that once stood there, or of the extraordinary events that shook it in 1850. But the records, the testimonies, and the unanswered questions endure, leaving historians and investigators to wonder whether the Phelps family escaped a haunting or simply outlived it. Those who believe the Stratford events were genuinely supernatural have offered several explanations over the years. Here are some of the most commonly discussed paranormal interpretations. Classic poltergeist activity. This case fits the traditional profile of a poltergeist, an unseen force manifesting through physical disturbances, often centered on a household experiencing emotional turmoil, possibly amplified by the stress or the children's emotional states. Spirit communication. The spirit writings, rapping responses, and apparent messages led many to conclude the house was a site of active communication from the dead, or perhaps demonic forces. Coming at the dawn of the spiritualist movement in the mid-19th century, some saw the Phelps case as strong evidence of a world beyond our own. Residual haunting. Others suggest the phenomena were not intelligent at all, but rather residual imprints, echoes of past events or emotions left behind in the house itself, replaying like a broken record. A targeted haunting. Some paranormal theorists propose the disturbances were directed specifically at the Phelps family, possibly triggered by Reverend Phelps' own interest in mysticism and spiritualism, or by unresolved tensions within the household. On the other side, skeptics and rational investigators have proposed more earthly explanations for what happened on Elm Street. Here are the leading skeptical interpretations. A hoax by the children. The most persistent theory is that the stepchildren, particularly Anna and Henry, were responsible for many of the disturbances. Adolescents have been implicated in numerous historical poltergeist cases, often due to stress, a desire for attention, or simple mischief. Psychological and emotional factors. The blended family structure, the significant age gap between Reverend Phelps and his wife, Mrs. Phelps reported unhappiness in Stratford, and the general pressures of the household may have created an environment ripe for misinterpretation, collective hysteria, or even unconscious psychokinetic effects. Exaggeration by witnesses and the media. While some events may have had a basis in reality, Historians point out that 19th century newspapers were eager for sensational stories. Reports were often amplified, dramatized, or repeated without verification, turning minor incidents into extraordinary tales. Environmental factors. The old house's unusual construction, creaking beams, drafts, shifting floorboards, and its maze-like layout could have produced sounds, movements, and optical illusions that were mistaken for paranormal activity, especially in a household already on edge. Most of the phenomena can be accounted for by human or environmental causes, yet the locked room effigies and their rapid, elaborate construction under close watch remain the elements skeptics find hardest to fully explain. The Stratford Poltergeist remains one of America's most dramatic early paranormal cases. From March to October 1850, it left testimonies, newspaper reports, and enduring mysteries. Believers see proof of unseen forces. Skeptics point to human mischief, psychology, and exaggeration. Both sides have strong points. The truth may lie somewhere in between or beyond. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, give a like and hit subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our new content.